And now I would like to pass to Andrei Kuusvek.
Thank you very much. It's an absolute pleasure and a privilege to be here. And if Socrates, you would not have corrected your own mistakes, then I would have done it for you, because I saw this avalanche coming. And in my presentation, I will get to the point how regulators and stock exchange have to be the two crucial pillars of the ecosystem. As said, my name is Andrei Kuusvek. I'm leading the capital market development at the EBRD, or the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, head office in London. Capital market development is one of the three core strategic themes for the bank across all its 38 countries and all the different sectors, alongside supporting small business and supporting the green economies and energy efficiency. Having said that, a few words about the EBRD. We are owned by 67 governments as of today, plus 2 international institutions, European Commission and the European Investment Bank, separately as shareholders, and we operate in 38 economies all the way from Morocco to Mongolia and a lot of what is in between. We focus on the private sector. We are commercially orientated, not profit maximizing, but certainly profit targeting. If we go in, we try to take more risk than others, and if we succeed, we try to bring along as many others as we can, and hopefully others will follow and equally succeed. Let me start from the very obvious as far as capital markets are concerned. What you see here is a graph that puts into perspective on how the wealth of the nations is dependent on the size of capital markets. So you will see on the horizontal axis the percentage of capital markets as of the GDP, and then on the other axis the GDP, this time nominal, not PPP, they're based, and you will see that there is a clear red line in this case, could be any color in fact, pointing in the direction that the more capital market financing is available, the wealthier the country. And I think it is true for both sides, for the demand side as well as for the supply side. Very often the governments talk about capital markets only as a source of funding, but in reality it is also a source of saving for the domestic population, because in many of the EBRD countries, for instance, the financial sector is very bank dominated, and the only options really for the people to save long term is bank deposits, which pay you these days about 0 point very little, or buying another property for those that can afford it, which in turn works against those that need it perhaps and can't afford it. Moving on, we strongly believe that capital markets are having positive effects both on the micro level. These are the green puzzle pieces at the bottom, as well as on the macro level. So you will see that a greater and more diversified access to capital gives you more flexible financing options, improved governance, which again was an important topic last year and I think continues to be, even if we don't put it as a theme of tonight's gathering, is very important. R&D, or any sort of innovation, in fact, comes very often out of fresh capital. And that is generating wealth at the micro level, which in turn then turns into overall better competitiveness, greater innovation and economic growth on the macro level. I think it is particularly important also for Greece, which perhaps traditionally has been bank-dominated. Now the banks have been going through a difficult patch. We know it firsthand. I remember vividly when we first met with Socrates about 5 years ago, we had a meeting scheduled for about 5 p.m., which was probably his last and our last for the given day. And I recall the faces that we saw, and I realized that anything that is called European might be received with a certain and justified level of skepticism. But we clicked imminently, and we, in fact, our ways parted about 7 hours later after we had been invited to dinner, which was really fantastic, I think, as a way of cementing the relationship. But coming back to banks, since then we have been a partner to Greece overall. Greece has now become one of the 5 top countries in terms of our annual investment. We have invested in many listed companies, including each of the 4 banks, in fact. We have invested in a number of corporate bonds, which have made a comeback to the market, and finally also to the energy exchange alongside ATHEX. Another slide that tries to demonstrate how innovation is dependent on being able to attract new capital and the overall capitalization level at the enterprise level. You will see these red pillars where on the scale of least innovative number 1 and the most innovative number 10, there is a clear trend that the better capitalized the company, the more it has chances to invest in R&D, innovate, improve its productivity, and obviously then flourish. On the left-hand side, the graph demonstrates what is happening to the company growth within a 3-year period, of which the first year is counted as pre-IPO and then the other 2 years as post-IPO. And what you can see is that there is a significant growth within these 3 years in each total assets, net sales, and the number of employees. And I think the percentages actually illustrate how also the efficiency of the companies is improved. So number of employees is increasing by 75%, actually gives you a greater increase in both net sales and even more so on the total asset side. What you see here is a sophisticated watch, perhaps a Swiss watch, perhaps not. But I like the analogy between a watch and the capital market because of, first, its complexity, and second, also, what we see these days is that we are moving from mechanical to digital, both in the watch industry as well as in the exchange industry. So today we're here to talk about ecosystem, and my point is that on this watch, the hour handle here is the stock exchange, but there is a lot behind it. And without you here in the audience and without you being part of that ecosystem, the exchange will never alone be able to succeed. I would also like to make the point that the governments and regulators have a crucial role to play. A week ago, I was in Korea, and I think there are a few things that we Europeans can learn from the emerging Asian countries, how they have built their financial markets, and particularly the capital market, where importantly for the regulators, what we often see in Europe, when I ask the question, look, who in your country has the mandate to promote and develop capital markets? And often it's somewhere between, Ministry of Finance, central bank, financial sector regulator, and then somebody else that is difficult to find. Yet in Asia, the mandate to develop capital markets is a very clear part of the mandate for the regulators, and the governments as a whole are setting up an ecosystem to support companies all the way from the startup to SMEs to growth companies, and to finally then make their listing perhaps initially on the SME list on the stock exchange and then finally on the main list. Korea, for instance, which is the 20th largest economy by its GDP, now has the 3rd largest SME market on the stock exchange, KOSDAQ. So my final slide here is really, how do we build momentum? And you can see that there is a need for the governments and stock market participants, including the exchange, to act together and to act in coordination. So joint leadership is important, so sending the messages out to the investment community, but also to the citizens of the country. Economic policies that are simple and conducive to growth. Regulatory environment, as I said, set. And here I think, Greece has all the ingredients, being, fully compliant in terms of the EU rules. We should now find out, look, how can we also best use perhaps some of the resources that the European Commission can provide. Further on the government side, privatizations through the stock exchange, either for the full ownership of the company to be privatized through an IPO, or perhaps a significant minority stake in case of strategically relevant companies where the government wants to retain a control. Tax regime is an important part. And then finally, the diversified institutional investor base, and first and foremost, the pension system, to have a system where people accumulate savings on their own account and take ownership on where these savings are being invested over time, I think is very important. And all this should be cemented through further communication, increasing financial literacy, and building capacity of the various institutions at play. This is all that I wanted to say for my own presentation. This is only a modest lead to our discussion that follows. Thank you very much.